Admission to God Chenghuang. My brother-in-law's grandfather, Mr. Song, named Tao, was a scholar supported by the government in this county. One day, he was ill in bed and vaguely saw an official holding a white four-head horse coming to him with document in his hand, and said to him, "Please go to the exam." Mr. Song said, "I didn't see the examiner yet. How could I take the exam?" The official said nothing, just keep urging Mr. Song to go on his way. Mr. Song had no choice but to try hard to ride on his horse and follow him despite his illness. Mr. Song felt very unfamiliar along the way. Finally he arrived at a city. It seemed to be the capital of a king. As he walked, he entered the palace with the man, a splendid and magnificent palace. He looked up and saw a dozen gods-like officials sitting in the main hall, none of whom he recognized except Emperor Guan. There were two small rectangular tables and two stools under the eaves outside the main hall. A scholar had already arrived and sat there first. Mr. Song sat down side by side with him. There are pens and paper on the two tables. After a while, the test papers flew down on the table. At first glance, there were few words on the test paper. One person or two, intentional or not. After they finished their articles, they sent them to the main hall. There is a sentence like this in Mr. Song's article. Doing good deeds deliberately and with purpose should not be rewarded even if good deeds are done. Doing bad deeds unintentionally should not be punished even if bad deeds are done. The gods in the main hall read it and praised it endlessly. Then they called Mr. Song to come to the main hall. One of them ordered, "Province Henan is short of God Chenghuang, and you are very qualified." After hearing this, Mr. Song suddenly realized, and then caught out to the ground, crying and said, "Thank you God for the appointment, asked me to be the city god. I dare not refuse. It's just that I have an old mother at home who is over 70 years old and has no one to take care of her. I would like to ask a favor to allow me to serve my mother until she dies before I take up my post." There was an emperor-like man sitting in the middle of the hall. He immediately sent someone to get Mr. Song's mother's life book. A bearded official took the book, looked through it, and reported, "His mother can live for 9 years. The gods hesitated and couldn't make up their minds. Emperor Guan said, "We might as well ask Deng Xin to act as agent for 9 years, and then take over." He said to Mr. Song, "I should have asked you to take office immediately, considering your filial piety. I will give you 9 years of vacation and then come back to take office." Then Emperor Guan said a few more words to encourage the scholars. They caught out and went out of the hall. The scholar then held Mr. Song's hand and sent him to the outskirts. He introduced himself as a native of Changshan County and his surname was Theng. He also wrote a farewell poem to Mr. Song. I have forgotten the original text, but only remember this sentence. With flowers and wine, spring is always there. Without candles and light, night always lightens it off. Mr. Song got on his horse and said goodbye and went home. When Mr. Song arrived home, he seemed to wake up from a dream. He had been dead for 3 days by then. His mother heard groans in the coffin, opened the coffin, helped him out, and stayed there for a long time before he could speak. Later, he went to Changshan County to inquire, found out a scholar named Theng died on that day. 9 years later, Mr. Song's mother passed away. Mr. Song finished the funeral arrangement, took a bath, put on new clothes, entered the house and died. His father-in-law lives by the west gate of the city. One day, he suddenly saw Mr. Song riding a big horse with red tassels and bringing many carriages and horses to his house to say goodbye. The whole family was very surprised, not knowing that he had become a god. He hurried to Mr. Song's house and checked, only to find out that Mr. Song was dead. Mr. Song himself recorded a short biography, but it was not well preserved during the war and chaos. The records here are only approximate. Admission to God Chenghuang is a novel written by Pu Songling, a writer in the Qing Dynasty. This novel tells the story of the protagonist, Mr. Sun, who was invited by a god to become a city god called Chenghuang after his death. However, with no one took care of his mother, Mr. Sun begged to take up the post after his mother passed away. His filial piety to his mother moved the gods and allowed him to return alive. This story reflects the emphasis on filial piety in ancient China. As the first article of LiaoZhaiZhiYi, the author borrows the hands of scholars to write out his own views on good and evil, and also uses the poems exchanged between scholars. Showed his magnanimity, and at the same time satirized the ugly atmosphere under the imperial examination system at that time through the clever arrangement of the story. The plot of this story goes from reality to fiction, from fiction back to reality, and then from reality back to fiction. This adds a layer of authenticity and reality to the illusory story, which enhances the artistic appeal of the work. The original Chinese text is as follows.
与子丈之祖宋公会道，亦廪生。一日，病卧，见丽人持蝶千百颠马来，云：请复使公言，文宗未临，何惧的考？吏不言，但敦促之。公立即乘马从去。路甚生疏，至邑城郭，如往者都。移时入府谢，公事壮丽，上座10余官，都不知何人，为官壮谋可识。檐下设几蹲各二，先有一秀才作其末，公便与连间。几上各有笔札，额题纸飞下，视之八字云：一人二人，有心无心二公文成，呈殿上。公文中有云：有心为善，虽善不赏；无心为恶，虽恶不罚。诸神传赞不已。赵公上谕曰：河南缺一城隍，君称其职公方务，顿首契约，以汝应宠命，何敢多辞？但老母七旬，奉养无人，请得中其天年。唯听录用上义帝王相者，即命姬母受疾，有长须吏捧册翻阅一过，白有阳算9年，共筹除奸。官帝曰：不妨令张生设传9年，瓜代可也。乃魏公应即赴任。今推仁孝之心，给假9年，及期当复相召，又勉励秀才数语。二公稽首并下，秀才握手，送诸郊野。自言常山张某，以诗赠别，都忘其词。中有花有酒春常在，无烛无灯夜自明之句。公既其，乃别而去。及邸里，或若梦寤。时足以3日，母闻关中呻吟，浮出，半日始能语。问知常山国有张生，于是日死矣。后9年，母果足，迎葬祭毕，唤着入室而没。其月家居城中西门内，忽见公漏英珠坟，于马甚重，登其堂，一拜而行。相共惊疑，不知其为神。奔讯乡中，则已没矣。公有自记小传，昔乱后无存，此其略耳。